Great to see you all. Welcome to Veterans Breakfast Club Happy Hour for Monday, June 20th. We have a pretty relaxed schedule tonight in terms of our normal VBC program. We're always sort of hitting the ground running, but we have open conversation tonight. We have some topics that we're certainly going to get to. But I'm Sean Hall, Director of Programming with the VBC. And with me, as always, is Todd DiPestino, the Executive Director. Todd, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing very well. Just drove in from Chicago. And nothing like driving the Indiana Turnpike and the Ohio Turnpike for inspiration.
I'm sure. When I need inspiration, that's the first place I think to go. Yeah. It's straight onto the turnpike. A happy belated Father's Day to everyone out there. Hope you all had a wonderful weekend. It's a beautiful day here in Pittsburgh. It was a beautiful weekend, really. But before we get to our open conversation and a couple of the new guests, I do see a lot of new names in the room tonight that we do want to talk with. Doug and Bev, welcome to the program. Travis Buggy, I hope I'm saying your last name correctly. Welcome to the program. Larry Murley, I believe you've joined us once or twice before, so it's good to see you. New song, Herb, it's just been a long time since we've seen you on the program. It's great to see you back. Ida May, always a pleasure. Brad, Roger, it's always a pleasure. Thanks for sporting the hat. Yeah, it's a good room tonight for Monday night, and also a happy Juneteenth. Hopefully everyone had a relaxing day here today. Before we get started, we want to go over our sponsors. I want to thank them. Sponsors. First and foremost, we're going to thank D&D Auto Salvage. I'd show you the picture here. Let me pop it up. I think there we go. D&D Auto Salvage. You've heard us talk about them several times. They began as a small hauling and used auto parts operation here in Pittsburgh in the 1970s. They've really grown into a full-service metal recycling company with 2 locations in Lawrenceville and Tarentum. D&D, they accept all kinds of metal. So if you need something from them, they are great for small commercial entities. They're great for individual customers. They have a wide variety of material handling equipment and are capable of managing any type of job in a timely and efficient manner. And they've been a great supporter of VBC for quite a while now, so we're very thankful for them. You can contact them for quotes and availability at d&dautosalvage.com. Also wanted to thank Tobacco-Free Adagio Health. They've also been supporting the VBC for quite a while now. They are dedicated to reducing and preventing tobacco use and for getting the word out about the hazards of smoking and secondhand smoke. They want people to quit, so they have classes, they have a nicotine replacement therapy, they have a popular quit line, 1-800-QUIT-NOW. They also educate people, children especially, about tobacco use from cigarettes.
Turn that monitor off.
Yeah? I'm sorry?
I
missed that.
Let's see. No, this is
okay.
This is an already problem here.
But finally, Tobacco-Free Adagio Health advocates for public and private policies that ensure healthy places to live, work, and play. You can learn all about what they have to offer at tobaccofree.adagiohealth.org or watch the Scuttlebutt. I always bring it up because they came onto the Scuttlebutt as a special guest and talked about the programs that they offer. A really wonderful program. You can see that on YouTube. This is something we are very excited about, that Todd had a brainstorm idea and said, what if we rent out a movie theater, have a small price, $8 per person to come and watch Top Gun Maverick. And then afterwards, we have a discussion with fighter pilots. This is going to be a once in a lifetime thing. We'll call it that because Top Gun Maverick's only going to be in the theaters for so long. But if you have not seen this movie, I saw it last weekend. It is incredible. If you loved the first one, you're going to really love the second one. It gave me chills through the whole movie. I really enjoyed it. So Phoenix Theaters in Bridgeville here in Pittsburgh, Chartreuse Valley Shopping Center. This is going to happen Saturday, July 1st at the 1 p.m. matinee. There are limited seats available. How many seats, Todd?
Well, we need to get 50.
Okay, so we have a limit. We need to get 50.
No, not a limit. We need at least 50. It's the opposite of a limit. A minimum.
We need a minimum. Sorry, we need a minimum of 50. So if you haven't purchased tickets yet, please do. We can put a link here into the chat. And if you've seen it already, join us again because the after discussion is going to be us talking with some fighter pilots about the movie. So they'll tell you what worked, what didn't work, what was kind of, a little out there, or all the fun stuff that they're going to pump into this to make it Hollywood-ish, but it's going to be a good conversation afterwards. And
I will also throw in that we want to have carrier crews on also, those who worked flight decks, those who served on aircraft carriers, because apparently I guess a lot of the aircraft carrier life is kind of covered in the movie, at least according to Don Nemchek.
It starts off on an aircraft carrier. It's like it's almost if you're watching the first one in the first several minutes of the movie, and so you see what's going on the flight deck, and you do catch a very fast glimpse of an F-35. They put like a 2-second clip of one at the very beginning, and then they never show it again because it's all about the F-18 in this movie. Next up is tomorrow night's Greatest Generation Live. This has changed from a conversation with an author. Fortunately, that author, we no longer have a part of it, so we will have open conversation tomorrow night about World War II. Todd, what are some of the topics you think you would like to discuss tomorrow?
Well, I don't know. It will be open conversation. I have a few subjects in hand. Glenn Flickinger has a few subjects in hand. And we're going to talk tomorrow about which of the few that we'll throw out there. And then, of course, we'll invite people to talk about any aspect of World War II they'd like to discuss. The original program was with Charles Stanley Jr., who wrote a wonderful book, a really entertaining and lively book about 150 airmen who went down in Yugoslavia and were snuck out by Tito's partisans in 1944. And the author had to cancel for tomorrow night. So we're going to reschedule him. But Glenn and I decided that show must go on. And you know us, I mean, we love to blab about being a historian. I love to blab about World War II. Glenn, who's read every book on World War II that's ever been published, I think, loves to talk about it. So we're just decided we're going to do open conversation tomorrow.
Definitely going to be a fun one, and it's a great way to join in tomorrow night. And then look forward to next Monday. Laura Naylor Colbert will be joining us. She wrote the book How to Peace Standing Up, or Sirens, an alarming memoir of combat and coming back home. Todd, how did we get in touch with Laura? And
she got in touch with us. She just kind of I think she got in touch with us, or somebody put her in touch with us saying, hey, she's written this really interesting book, combat experience as an MP in Iraq, and then coming back home and dealing with PTSD, which she did not anticipate that she would ever have. And I had a conversation with her over Zoom, and she was really interesting. So I thought we would schedule her.
That's exciting. I'm looking forward to that conversation with Laura. It's always good to converse with the post 9/11 generation about their experiences. So it's something to look forward to for next Monday. Also, magazine time. If you haven't gotten your magazine, does everybody have their new VBC magazine? It went out in the mail a couple of weeks back. We got a bunch of boxes. I'll be dropping some off tomorrow morning for our Christ United Methodist Church in-person breakfast. We get handing them out so people will start getting them and you'll start seeing them around. But if you are not getting a magazine and you'd like one, they're free. All you need to do is let us have your address. Send us your address and we will make sure to get one in the mail to you. It's a really wonderful magazine. About 32 pages, Todd? And
32 pages.
Filled with stories. We get a lot of good feedback about this magazine. People love to read it front to back. It's a fantastic conversation starter. So please send us your address if you'd like to receive a copy. And you can also get a copy if you join as a VBC member, which you can do on our website, veteransbreakfastclub.org. It's $36 a year. You not only get the magazine, but you get discounts on a lot of our merchandise and swag and other great perks, such as our membership only events, which we will be announcing a new one coming up soon, our next Jeopardy event. Next up on our announcements here is Veterans History Project. This is a really wonderful project that we've been going on for about 6 months now. If you're a veteran and you'd like to tell your story, sign up for our Veterans History Project. We would love to have you come on. We have a lot of volunteers, both veteran and non-veteran, to pair you up with. You come on Zoom. It lasts about 45 minutes to an hour. You can choose to keep this video as just an archive for your family, or you can let us, put it on our website, put it onto our social media. It's up to you. But this is a great way for you to connect and be able to tell your story, which is exactly why we built this project. We had a really wonderful Boy Scout who was turning into Eagle Scout, and he did this project with us and interviewed 12 veterans and submitted them all to us. A really wonderful way for us to engage the Eagle Scout community and getting them involved. So if you would love to be a part of this, please email us and we'll get you signed up. And finally, Scuttlebutt. Scuttlebutt this week, I had a great conversation with Kenny Mintz. You can see there on the screen. He is a 30-year Army veteran who is walking across the country. I found out about him from Betty Karleski.
And I can't hear you.
Where's he
Sent me
at?
some
I wonder.
information about Kenny.
walking
I
across.
reached out to him, found him on Facebook. He's created a social media account so that he can sort of catalog his walk across the country. He's walking for several reasons. One of them being is that his mother lost her battle with pancreatic cancer. So he's walking for cancer research, but he's also walking for veterans organizations in trying to raise awareness for veteran suicides. He has a really incredible story. I caught up with him as he was traversing Illinois. I believe now he is currently in Milwaukee. As I've sort of been watching him go across with watching him on Facebook. He's posting a lot of great pictures, but I believe that we were the first person to catch up with him and interview him. And I was super excited to chat with him. He's a really great guy, super down to earth. And a lot of what he was talking about was, you know, this is a chance for me to meet all of the Americans that I served throughout my entire life, and I can see the country in just a different way. So he's going from DC to California, and he's about halfway there now. So if you want to check that out, you can go to our website and watch the episode or download it as an audio to listen to it. Those are all the announcements I have. And, you know, we wanted to make sure to also thank, is Teresa Lalick? I hope I'm pronouncing your name right. Are you still with us?
I think she dropped off.
Okay, not a problem. Teresa's going to be with us, I believe, tomorrow for our in-person breakfast. Larry Murley, you are here in the room with us. Larry? I'll ask you to unmute. Don, I see your hair up, hand up, hair up. I see your hair up, Don. You got good hair.
I'm there.
Hey,
Can
Larry,
you hear me now?
We can hear you, Larry. 1 second. Don, I see your hand raised.
Yeah, good evening. I'd just like to welcome two of our new participants today, Doug and Bev. Very interesting story. I hope they share it with us, and we certainly welcome them aboard. Two Navy veterans that reconnected after 4 decades. And it's a pretty cool story. I got a chance to meet them at the Flag Day event. And again, we welcome them wholeheartedly and hope you continue on with us.
Thank you, Don and Doug and Bev. Larry, we'll get to you in just a minute. Doug, Bev, this is an article that was written about you in the Trib, correct?
That's correct.
Can you give us a highlight reel? You reconnected after 4 decades?
Yes, and I could tell, Doug and Bev, this is a great article. I've got a lot of people sent it to me after it came out, because they said like, oh, you've got to read this story. And I did read it. And then of course I met you at our wonderful Flag Day event. And reading the story, I understood what brought you together. And that is your fashion sense, your shared fashion sense. Unique. Not many people share it. But here's a picture of you back in what, 1977, something like that. What in the world was going on in this picture?
We were at a campfire.
Okay. Okay.
And we were just, you know, it was one of those pictures where somebody said, "Hey, Bev," and I looked and they snapped it and that was it.
Well,
I don't know what I was doing.
Yeah, we won't ask. There are more respectable pictures of each of you, both of you Navy veterans, and you served in the Navy together. You knew each other back in the 70s, and then you reunited just recently, right?
Yes.
Yes.
So can you
Yes.
tell us a little bit about how you reunited first?
Well, I was in contact with Doug's roommate all these years. We stayed in contact. And just recently, Butch had asked me if I had ever, you know, have you heard from Doug? Do you know where Doug is? I'd like to get a hold of him. He had just been diagnosed with lymphoma. So I went out on the internet and there was information out there and I gave it to Butch and Butch contacted Doug. And Doug asked, you know, how'd you get my number? And he said, Bev. And he says, oh, well, let me call her. So that's how we kind of got back in contact with each other.
So you had been out
Yeah.
of contact for how many years? 45 years?
45 years.
Yeah.
45 years. And
Yes.
had you dated at all when you were in the Navy?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, we were together on the Cape in Western Australia at Harold E. Holt I was there for 18 months and she was there for 3 years.
Mhm.
So, and then when I got shipped back to the States, we just lost contact and
Yeah.
life got in the way,
Right.
everything like that. 45 years later, and we reestablished contact, and about 500 hours on the phone later, we're now married. So
So how long did it take between the two of you getting reunited and then getting married?
85 days.
But it's been percolating and kind of brewing for 45 years. So,
Yeah.
Absolutely.
and when you were in the Navy, who outranked whom?
He's the boss.
I stayed in. So I ended up retiring after 22 years, and I'm retired as a chief petty officer. Doug stayed in for what, 7 years? And
7 years, and and got out as a second class.
Right.
And so the whole time she was in being in the Navy, I was a long haul truck driver. So yeah, she's the boss. She outranks me.
Master Chief. And so, Beverly,
the chief.
could you tell me why you joined the Navy to begin with?
Well, originally I wanted to get into the nuclear power field. That was back in the 70s. I tested and they told me I qualified for everything the Navy had. And I said, I want the nuclear power field. They said, well, you can't have it. And I said, why not? He said, how would you like to be on a submarine 9 months out of the year with 100 other men? And I said, well, I wouldn't mind, and I don't think they would either. And it was all shipboard ratings, and women weren't allowed on ships when I joined.
Wow. Did you know that when you joined?
Yes, kinda, I did, but I didn't think that it was really that bad.
Yeah.
When I came in, it was in the 70s, and we were still called waves. It was still considered.
I'm sorry to talk over you, Bev, but yeah, that was going to be my next question. When were the waves abolished? So when you came on, you were a wave.
Yes. Yeah.
Women accepted for volunteer emergency service.
Yes.
That goes back to World War II.
Yes. Yes. Over time, they decided to drop the name, and we became WINS, Women in the Navy. And then they decided to drop that name, and eventually we became sailors.
To sailors, right, right. So you liked it well enough to stay in 22 years.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I stayed in 9 years on active, and then went into the reserves and finished out in the reserves.
And Rick here says her photo displays sparks for radioman second class.
Yes. That was a picture that was taken when I made second class.
Okay. Wonderful. And Doug, why did you join the Navy?
Because I love the uniform and I was dying to get on a ship, and I love the fact that you could grow a beard.
Because it was what, Admiral Zumwalt's Navy back then, right?
Yeah,
Yes.
that's right. I tried to, right out of boot camp, I tried everything I could to get on a ship, and they sent me to Harold E. Holt, and I thought, okay, what do I have to do to get on a ship? But as it turned out, it was the best thing that ever happened. So yeah, I eventually got on a ship, and I loved it. I did.
How wonderful. And Bev, I believe you're from originally Topeka, Kansas.
No, that's me.
Oh, that's you. Okay, Doug, you're from Topeka. Bev, you're from Irwin, the Western Pennsylvania.
Mhm.
Got it. Okay. So Doug, you're the one who moved here to Western Pennsylvania.
Right. I lived on Whidbey Island out of Seattle.
Okay.
And
oh, wow.
I recently recently moved about just recently within the last 2 weeks to Irwin, Pennsylvania. So
Wow, well, thank you both so much for joining us, and I hope to see you a lot, both at our in-person events and our Zoom events here. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
You're welcome.
thank you very much.
All right, and I shared the link to the great article on them here in the chat. You can take a look at it if you want. Hey, we have a Navy Wave, an original Navy Wave on. Julia, I haven't seen you in so long. This is, if you don't know Julia Parsons, this is Julia Parsons turned 101 in March. She was a Navy Wave and a code breaker in World War II. And she was just honored Memorial Day in Washington, D.C. for the PBS Memorial Day extravaganza, I guess you would call it, that they have every Sunday before Memorial Day. And she was one of the 9 World War II women on stage. I took a quick screenshot of her when she appeared. This is Julia. Julia, my only complaint was this: they did not have you speak.
Yes, we were very annoyed. We all got together, decided we ought to send them a letter of complaint. But it wasn't NPR's fault. It was Hollywood took over.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, they just ran everything too long, and there wasn't time to do anything but read our names. So we felt that we were used, and we didn't like that.
Oh,
but
Julia.
But we had a great weekend in Washington. It was great to be back. The weather was perfect, and it all went very smoothly. It was
There were
very
9
nice.
of you, 9 of you
Yeah.
women up there on stage. And
Four of them were Rosie the Riveters. They were really riveters.
Right. Right.
And there was one Coast Guard woman, and the other women I didn't get to meet. They came from a nursing home, the 3 of them, just the day of the concert. So we didn't get to know them at all. I don't know what they did.
Oh, Beth. Hey, Beth Ruschel, how are you? Beth asked in the chat here, did she meet Gary Sinise? Did you meet Gary Sinise?
I did, and I had a long chat with Joe. I don't know how you pronounce his name. Yeah, something like that. He was very nice. I liked him very much.
Great.
He was nice. And I met and talked to Mark Milley. He came in with his entourage and chest full of ribbons and banners and medals and whatever. It was very nice, but I still have not seen the concert. If anybody taped it, let me know, because I'd like to have it.
It is available on YouTube, the whole thing. I could send you the link to it, Julia.
Oh, okay. Well, I could probably find it. They said they would send us a copy of what they did professionally, I should say. But so far, I haven't heard anything from them. They apologize for not giving us a little more time. And why we all had to wear navy blue and black, I don't know, because we certainly did not stand out.
No, you did not. I
at
agree.
all.
I agree.
All my friends said I should boycott them, and I said, boycott who? Hollywood?
Right.
Yeah,
Good
but
luck.
it was a great weekend. They picked up all the tabs for food and hotel and transportation and everything for 5 of us. So that was great.
I've got to tell you,
Yeah.
Julia, immediately the following day, a bunch of us went around and commented because we watched it. And that's the one thing we said is like, that was way too fast. They panned your 9 faces and named, just kind of threw your names out there way too fast. We all wanted to hear so much more about all of you. Because Rick asked, did you meet the oldest park ranger there?
Yes. I sat beside her at a dinner. She was as deaf as I was, so we had a pretty sad conversation. But it was she was very interesting. She had just retired the week before, so she was very little person, short and very very slim. But I don't know what she did the last few years, because she said she was having trouble walking. They also made us all sit in wheelchairs, which probably was safer
Right.
for everyone. But afterward, everybody got out of the wheelchairs and decided it was all a fake. So we were happy we were on at all. So,
I have to say, Jim Jameson said there's something wrong with the link. That appears to be a problem on the Trib end, not on the links end. That link should become live eventually again. I think the Trib website is down. So Julia, you would not do that again, huh?
well, I don't know, it took me 2 weeks to get over it.
Yeah.
I was really, really exhausted. But it was such fun seeing everything. Where I lived is now suburban homes, and where I work is now Homeland Security. Everything is so changed in Washington. I didn't even know my way around anymore, but it was fun.
And most people who are on the program are familiar with you, Julia, but Doug and Bev might not be, Larry might not be, Larry Murley, and Travis, I think, might not be. Julia Parsons served as a code breaker in the Shark Division at the Naval Communications Annex in Washington, D.C. during World War II, decoding Enigma, especially focusing on the traffic, the messages that were being sent back and forth from Berlin to the North Atlantic to U-boats. Really important, interesting, fascinating work. And Julia is our celebrity here at the Veterans Breakfast Club. So thank you, Julia, for joining us.
Thank you.
Hey, and I want to welcome Larry. You were on before. Larry, I forget who connected us. Do you remember?
My friend John Peart down here at the corner.
John, yes. And John's here tonight.
Yes, he is. Hi, John.
Hi, Larry. My God.
So Larry is a writer, and I asked Larry to make sure that he came on because he's a Vietnam veteran, but he served in Vietnam when very few Americans were serving in Vietnam in 1961 and 62. There were not many Americans then. Many of you will remember that 1969 was the peak year of American presence in South Vietnam. You'll remember the term escalation, that the war escalated every month. The number of troops that were serving in Vietnam escalated until they hit a peak in 1969, and then they started de-escalating. Well, Larry was on that early escalation. I mean, in 1960, during the 1960 presidential election, there were maybe 900 American advisors in South Vietnam. They were not authorized for combat operations. They could defend themselves. I think that's it. And then in 61, that number jumped to about 3,200. Larry must have been part of that group. And then the next year was, 11,000. Larry, can you tell us a little bit about what it was like to arrive in Vietnam in 1961?
Well, actually, I didn't arrive until February of 62.
Okay.
And it was hot, very hot. I had on khakis when we landed at Tan Son Nhut airport there. And when we stepped out of the plane in about 2 minutes, they were no longer khakis, they were brownies. They just turned brown immediately. It was an interesting time, interesting place. There was, I understand there was 5,000 of us there in early February. It escalated through the months.
Right.
When I left on May the 11th and 62, I was only there about 4 or 5 months. And when I left, the day I flew out of Da Nang, we flew out on a empty C-119 to the Philippines. And it was so empty that pilots, after he got offshore, he cut back to 2 engines, one on each side, of course, and flew back to the Philippines on 2 engines.
When you arrived in 1962 and you said there were about 5,000 American advisors, then that sounds about right to me, because month by month it went up. By the end of the year, there were about 11,053 American dead by the end of 1962. What were the rules of engagement? What were you allowed to do? What were you not allowed to do?
Oh, you wasn't allowed to do much. Let me tell you what happened to me first, and you probably understand why. I was when we went there to do a job. There was 17 of us, when we got there, they said, no, we're not going to do that. So you don't have a job. And I was taking it, there was an old hangar there at Tonsanute, and it was a combination of chow hall and theater and cafeteria, post office and barbershop, everything else there, lounge. And when we got there was some offices back in the back of it. And it took me back, and I got interviewed for about 2 hours. And as it turned out, what I actually did, I was a personal assistant to a CIA field officer.
Huh.
And I followed him around for about 4.5 months.
Huh.
Yeah.
And was that interesting?
Oh, you bet it was interesting. I spent about 3 months at that time in a Montagnard village up in the Central Highlands. We trained 25 soldiers, and we were doing recon on the Ho Chi Minh Trail for about 2 or 3 months at that period of time. And it was very interesting. It was, I was a 22-year-old farm boy from northeastern Arkansas, and they just dropped me in a whole other world. And I was just, if it had been water out of ground, I was so far over my head.
Wow. What did you know about Vietnam before you went there? I mean, were you even aware that it was a country or that there was a war going on there?
No, sir, I was not. We got on a plane in Africa and asked where we were going, and some non-com said that we're going to Vietnam. I just read something, where is that? And he said, oh, I'll never forget what he said. He said, oh, it's a little vacation spot over in Southeast Asia. You're just going to love it. That was the answer he gave. And well, and I did learn to love it. I have to say that. I saw Vietnam at its beautiful time before it was torn up and blown up and everything, and battles going on. There was battles going on then, don't get me wrong, there was, but I got to see the good part of it, the people and everything. I actually learned to love the people there, still do.
You wrote a book about it. I don't know
Yes,
if this is a novel or a memoir.
My wife is here with me. She bugged me for 20 years to write my story because it was such an unusual story. And I told her when we started, I said, I cannot write this as a true story because I can't substantiate any of it. I said, there is absolutely no way that I can prove a word. And I said, somebody going to come say you're a liar and I'm going to get my feelings hurt.
Yeah.
And so I kind of wrote it as fiction, but the most of it in there is true. Some of the things that I changed was that, well, for one thing, I was a single man in this story, and I wasn't in real life. I had a wife, little boy, just real young at home. And I wasn't from Texas, which I said I was. I am now, but I wasn't then. I was from northeastern Arkansas. And I changed a few things in it, but the basic story of what happened in Vietnam is true.
The title is Loss of Innocence, a Vietnam War story. You said you loved Vietnam and that you were lucky to be there before the country was torn up, but obviously there was a trauma of your service too. Loss of innocence is a traumatic thing to experience as a young man. Could you sum up what that loss of innocence was?
I just didn't know things happened like that. I didn't know. I was never familiar with a culture like that. And I have to kind of recount the village that we lived in up in the Highlands, and we worked out was sometime near the end of March, was overrun and destroyed. And to see what happened to the people, the children, the old people especially, was very traumatic to me. I just, I never expected to see anything like that. And then it went downhill from there. And well, to make it a long story short, that figure in that picture in that cage is me.
That's you.
Yes. My wife drew this picture. She drew that she did all the art in the book, and she drew the picture, but that was me.
Your wife
I was in her.
Your wife is a wonderful artist. Tell us about this. Was this a tiger cage?
It is a tiger cage. I was in a tiger cage for 2 weeks.
Larry, what happened? Tell us the story, please.
Well, I can only just bring it. You know, when the village was overrun, my partner about a week after that was killed, and I'm out there with 25 Montagnards. I can't really speak the language. I'm over my head. I'm not trained. I'm not qualified to continue, and I had to get out of there. And so I knew that there was a special forces camp somewhere east of there, and one of the young Montagnard men said he knew where it was and he'd take me there. And en route to there, I walked around a tree and there's 3 Viet Cong soldiers standing there with their rifles leveled at me, and they captured me and took me north. I don't know, several days walk to a village, and I was put in a cage there, interrogated quite severely, and I got something else, and I know a lot of guys. I had somebody tell me just the other day that's true too. I carried no identification. I wore no insignia of rank. I wore no uniform, and we had a cover story more or less that we were my team leader, my superior. He was a professor studying the Montagnard culture, and that's what we were doing. And but I was in that cage for 2 weeks, and I got lucky. I escaped. I picked a time when the village was almost empty. There had been a bunch of the Viet Cong come through, and almost everybody left with them except just some of the older people and the NVA lieutenant that was in charge of it. And I escaped one night, middle of the night. I walked for, and I don't know how long. In the book, I kind of insinuate that it's 8 or 9 days, but I really have no idea how long I walked, because most of the time I was just out of my head, and I was in pretty bad shape physically. And I come out on the coast over somewhere 35 miles or so north of Da Nang, and was picked up by an R-van unit and brought back into Da Nang there. And I got back to Da Nang there on April 30th, and or 29th or 30th, somewhere just the last couple of days of April. And I was there for a week or so, and I went home.
You went home to the United States.
Yes.
Was there much of a debriefing?
Yes, sir. After I flew out on that plane to the Philippines, I was called into an office there in the Philippines with a couple of officers, 3 officers, and they sat for, it must have been 2 hours one afternoon, and they had me tell the whole story of everything I'd been involved in. And at that point, the last thing they told me before they got up and dismissed and left was, under penalty of treason, I do not divulge anything that I've been part of while on the continent of Southeast Asia, and somewhere in those words anyway.
Larry,
and I didn't.
And you did not?
No.
When did you start talking about it?
1982, 83. My first wife and I split up in 1980, and I had some emotional problems over that. I'd had emotional problems for 18 years, but they kind of come to a head then. And I went to a counselor, and luck turned out he was a retired major, and he was a Vietnam vet himself. And he kind of knew where I was. And he started me on a pathway to healing. It took a lot of years. And I wanted to mention right at that point too, that book was my best healing. And every time I speak in public to veterans, I will always challenge them to write their stories. I don't care what they did, who they were, or whatever. Write that story, get it down. You know, somebody, you're one of your great grandchildren or something, or want to know about that.
Amen.
And that's my challenge to every veteran.
And Larry, that's our challenge with the Veterans Breakfast Club. That's why we hold these events. If you're not going to write your story, then at least you can come on and maybe tell us a little bit about it. And not only, I think, is there a healing element for veterans, there's an educational element for people like me who aren't veterans and who are just amazed and stunned and fascinated by every story a veteran shares. I want to open it up to the room. I'm sure we have a lot of questions, but before people raise their hands, and please feel free to raise your hands either, electronically with the Zoom hand raising or just like this. I would imagine, Larry, that it would be difficult, that your trauma and your emotional problems might have been compounded by the fact that you could not talk about it.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Boy, do we have questions here? Jeff Witherell, I think you have some questions here in the chat, Jeff.
You said that you were advisor to what, 25 Montagnards?
Yes, sir.
I see. And
I'm sorry.
I was going to ask you what were your rations with them?
I'm sorry, I didn't understand that.
What were the rations you ate with the Montagnards?
The rations?
Yeah, the rations, food.
We ate their food. We lived in their village. We
Okay.
didn't carry rations.
Okay.
Rations would have been a sign of a military operation. We
Okay.
lived with them.
Okay. When you got back, Larry, did you get any offers from DOD or CIA to work for them or anything?
No, I did not.
No. Okay. Thank you.
Larry, have you been back to Vietnam? Ben Wright asked that question.
No, sir, I have not.
Why did you said earlier that you love the country and you still love the people. How could you possibly say that after what you endured?
Because the people, especially the Montagnard people, are some of the finest people I ever met in my life. When I landed in that village, and we landed in a little small plane, similar to a Cessna or Piper Cub or something like that, and they met us when we landed. We walked across a little into the village. From that time on, I remember that family. I was one of them.
Yeah.
And in many cases, they were. I was closer to them, and I was many of the people in my own community at home. And they were so genuine. They were so honest. They were so loyal. They were, I wouldn't be sitting here today except for two of them. I really wouldn't. I wouldn't be here today except for two of them.
Wow. And you never were able to find out what happened to them, or did you see what happened to them?
Not to the soldiers. They were always, we lost a couple. I think we lost 4, to be honest with you, out of the 25. And no, I don't know what happened to them afterwards. And that's been a huge guilt thing that I've lived with from, in my book, I write about that afternoon when I flew out of Da Nang. And I just felt like I was deserting them.
Yeah.
And that was really hard. And I lived that for years. And I come home and I'm instructed to go back and resume my life as a civilian.
Right.
And how can anybody do that? And I think about these young men now that have been to Iraq and Afghanistan, and they've seen all that, and they're supposed to go back and just pick up and live like they just got out of high school.
Right.
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 That's an impossible order. It should never be put to them that should never.
I agree. And Larry, I've got to say, I would not have understood just what you said a few years ago, but talking with veterans so much, combat veterans especially, what I've learned is that it changes you permanently. And you can't go back to who
Yes.
you were. You can't go back to who you were, but you can go forward and become somebody else,
Yes.
somebody better and
Yes.
healthy, and somebody who
Yes.
has grown. And it sounds like that's what you've done.
And a lot more others. I have a friend, his name is James Franklin Morris, better known as Jim Morris. And he was a Green Beret. He was there in '63. And I read his book some years ago, and then he just got through writing another one. I talked to him the other evening. He lives out in California. And he did the same thing. He had such a shadow hanging over his life that his story was to me was brave, and he had a lot more to get over than I did, to be honest with you. Of different types, different things. But yes,
What happened to the American you were with in the village?
he was killed. He
was
was.
killed.
We were ambushed. Actually, we were ambushed by a group that we had just ambushed ourselves about a half day earlier, and they pulled out and left, and then they got us. And it's sad. There's another one. Oh man, his body was never recovered.
Oh.
And although he was CIA, he wasn't military. I have to tell you about Silver. He was in World War II right at the end. He told me these things, and he was in Southeast or in South Pacific, and he went in and he was underage. He got kicked out the first time, and he had to wait another 4 months to rejoin. And but he did the last few months of the South Pacific engagement, and then he come home and he couldn't go back to civilian life. He really loved the military, and so he joined again, and he went through Korea. And then when I met him in spring of '62, he had been in Southeast Asia at that point since sometime in the late '50s, I think, like '57 or so, somewhere in there. And he had been involved in all sorts of things he told me about. But the one thing he would never tell me was what his name was. I knew him as Silver, and that was all I ever knew him by, but he wouldn't tell me what his name was. I do know he came from somewhere up around Pittsburgh area, and that's all I really know about the man, except I loved him.
And he went by Silver.
Mm-hmm.
And his name is not on the wall
No.
because he was CIA.
If it is, I wouldn't know it.
You wouldn't know it.
Yeah.
Oh boy. I want to open it up to people who have comments or questions. John Pert, I don't know if you have more information about Larry you'd like to share, or if you have a prompt for him. Are CIA, are those who work for the Central Intelligence Agency who were killed in Vietnam, are they listed on the National Vietnam War Memorial, Washington, D.C.? That's a question I have for our group. I do not
I don't
know.
think so.
Thank you, Jeff.
I think they have their own wall, Todd, in the CIA building.
Do they really?
They have
Okay.
the stars on the wall.
Okay.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Really?
they don't have the names up there, but they got a star representing all the CIA.
Wow.
They don't have this, so they're not identified by name, but just by
Yeah.
a star.
Yeah,
Oh,
Oh.
boy.
That's in
yeah,
Langley.
Wow.
that's in
Brad
Langley.
Washabaugh put that. I wonder if it is on the CIA wall. Yeah.
How would you find out?
Yeah,
Yeah, that's what I figured.
How would you find out? Is there any way of finding out who he was?
I've tried.
You have tried?
Yeah. Written letters.
Oh, Larry, there's something so tragic and awful about this.
Yes.
How much do you know about his time at the end of World War II? Could it be
Good
traced to
question.
his deployment there?
He mentioned Okinawa,
okay.
and he wasn't a real talkative guy, to be real honest with you. He
Yeah.
just didn't talk a lot. To me, he was he knew more than anybody I ever met about how to survive in that time. And then yet, anyway, that's hard thing to.
Larry,
Yeah.
you were home. So you got home by around the late 1962?
No, I was home by the 15th of May. I processed out at Travis on the 13th of May, and I was home the next day.
And the Vietnam War had a long way to go. And so you were watching that war on TV like everybody else?
No, sir.
You did not follow the war.
I did not watch it. I could not watch it. I refused to watch it. I never watched anything about it until 1973 when the POWs came home, or when they were released. That's the first time I actually watched. I heard about that, and I had to watch that. And that's the first thing I watched.
Do you have a POW medal?
Do I?
Yes.
No, sir. I don't consider myself a POW, sir. I don't put myself in league with those gentlemen.
You were a POW, Larry, and you were in a tiger cage for 2 weeks. You were interrogated. Yeah. I'm assuming that you were mistreated or tortured, or you escaped, which is probably the only reason you're alive. Yeah. It just seems to me that recognition is deserved.
Well, like I say, I can't prove it. I can't prove a single word of it. Right after I wrote my book, my wife said, "Well, we ought to find out more about." And so she did a search for my records in the archives, and I was in that fortunate group that in '73 record, I think between the letters of L and Z or something like that. Right. I can't remember the exact date, but my records were in those, and I didn't know that until I read the book and everything.
Are you in the VA healthcare system?
No, sir, I'm not.
Oh my gosh, Larry.
I'm in pretty good shape for my age. I turned 83 week before last.
It's stunning that you're 83. I mean, you're in wonderful shape, at least from what I could see. This is tearing my heart out that your service was so traumatic and unrecognized. Rick asks, can Larry describe his treatment in the tiger cage and how he escaped?
Say that again.
Can you describe your treatment in the tiger cage?
That's pretty hard. It was, there was not a lot to eat. It wasn't fed very well. The thing I remember probably as much as anything else is the filth, and
a tiger cage, something like this.
Yeah, those are done with wire. Mine was just bamboo.
Yours was bamboo. Okay.
Yeah. One of the things that the people here would probably at least have read about that was used to try to extract information from me was the ropes, the hanging ropes, where they run the rope around you and pull your arms back behind you and tie you at the wrist and hang you by the wrist backwards.
Yeah.
That's probably one of the most hideous ones. And that was used only twice. But I didn't know anything.
Yeah.
I knew what I'd been doing, but I wasn't about to tell them that. Right. And I didn't. But as far as any military secrets, and I never ever told them that I was part of the military. I denied that all the way through to the very end. And I don't know if they believe me or not. But and the just the futility. I tell everybody now that when I talk to them, especially people that I know, that for the entire month of April 1962, I considered myself a dead man. I didn't know the exact minute it was going to happen, but I knew I was dead. I knew I was never coming out of this alive. And that got to me in my head really bad. And I blocked so much of it. And I blocked much of it for years. And with a little help, I've uncovered a lot of that. And that's helped. You know, a lot of this stuff has to be, you have to know it in order to clear it. You have to, if you don't remember it consciously, you can't clear it.
Yep.
And that was probably the hardest part of the whole thing, was trying to remember things that I buried on purpose.
Yep.
And yeah. And
how did you escape?
Luck of the Irish. They put me back in the cage about after this. Oh, maybe I was there probably in there about 4 or 5 days. They put me back in the cage one day, and it kind of rough. And they just kind of threw me in backwards, and I kind of slid in on my butt, and I cut my hand on something, and they just walked off and left me. And I started reaching around, figure out what I cut my hand on, and I found a piece of like a Spam can lid, you know, that had been cut out, or some kind of can. I don't know what it was. And I kind of thought, well, you know, if it's sharp enough to cut me, it might be usable. And so I would just take it and rub it in the sand, and I sharpened it as sharp as I could possibly get. And of a night, when everybody else was asleep, I would start sawing on those bamboo tubes that they make the cages. They wrap them in a green bamboo, and even a tiger can't tear out of it, you know. And I started cutting on 2 of them back in the very back end of it, and it took me 3 or 4 nights to get 1 bar loose. And I just wouldn't dare to leave. I couldn't bring myself to do it because I didn't want to get caught, and I knew they'd kill me. They caught me escaping.
Right.
And like I say, that group came through on a day, and they made sport with me a little bit, and then they all left, and just the lieutenant. I waited till he went to bed, and I laid there. It must have been like 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, and I cut that final little bit. I took my foot and kicked that bar loose. I was able to crawl between the other 2. I'd lost, in that period, I lost probably 40 pounds, 35, 40 pounds, you know, weight. And I was barefoot, and my clothes were barely on me. And I just headed out down the trail south that I came in on, and being real careful. And then I found another road going east, and I knew that if I had a prayer, I had to go east. And nothing to eat, you know, and I ate anything that didn't bite me back, you know.
Right.
And it must have took me somewhere around 3, 4, 5 days to walk across up there. I can't remember how far across it is, but I think it's about 45, 50 miles across there. And most of the times I would sleep in the daytime. I tied myself up in a tree or someplace and sleep in the daytime and travel at night. And in the book, I'll tell you, I found an old hut that had been abandoned. It was an old, like a scooter, you know, and I tore the tires off of it and cut them up and tore them up and wrapped them around my feet and wired them with wire to have something to put on my feet, because my feet was giving out on me. And but that's pretty much pretty much how I got back out. And I never thought I'd ever make
And you were picked up by an ARVN team.
it. Yeah. Well, there was probably a platoon of them or something, 8 or 10, something like that. There wasn't very many of them. And they was in a truck and Jeep. It must have been more than that. Maybe it's 15 or so of them. I can't remember. But they was in a truck and a Jeep, and they just, once they found out, you know, I was an American, you know, and they just took me right straight back down to Da Nang. And I don't remember the trip. I just kind of passed out in the Jeep. And
Right.
I remember coming through the gates there at Da Nang, and remember going to, and I can't remember the hospital. I almost think the hospital was in Quonset Hut, but I've never been sure of that. I wish I could remember that. And woke up the next morning in a clean bed. You can't believe how good a clean bed can feel.
Yeah.
That's got to be heaven, you know.
Yeah.
And food.
Yeah.
Real food. I'm mostly Irish, and you know, and I swear the luck of the Irish must have had something to do with it.
Luck, ingenuity, a person, you know, a will to live. Maybe it was in you.
Yeah.
Boy, oh boy. Larry, I've got to say, I've never heard of a story quite like this. I mean, I've heard of people being captured by Viet Cong and, you know, people being POWs, apart from the Hanoi Hilton POWs. But oh my gosh, and the fact that like that you really don't have anybody to share this experience with. When you were sent to Vietnam, did you know that you were going to be working intelligence, or did you really?
Oh no.
No, not at
No.
all. Okay.
No. I was trained at Keesler Air Force Base in Mississippi as a radar technician. And what my team did is we were specialists in tearing down a ground mobile radar site and moving it and setting it up. And that's what we were doing when we were told to get on the force and right away and went to Vietnam. But as we got to Vietnam, they decided they didn't want to do that.
Right.
And as it turned out, after we was there sometime in March, I assume, February, March, we met another team who was doing the same thing. They were helping set up listening posts out on the west of Pleiku there, near the border. And I thought it was kind of funny. I thought it was ironic to hear what I was sent to do. It didn't. Somebody else did it. But that's the military for you.
Do you know the name of the village where you were?
I've talked to several people since then, and I might have known, but mostly I don't think it had one. I have a friend who has a Montagnard wife. I visited with them and fell in love with her. She's such a beautiful girl and cook. Oh my God, she can cook. She can win your heart over just with her food. But he seems to think, after talking to her and talking to some of her relatives, that it was a satellite village. That they were up there maybe for a different reason, because there was no burial ground, or there was no cemetery there, and the Montagnards are real into where their people are laid to rest, and there was no sorry, I can't talk. There was no longhouse. It was just a cluster of small huts, and I've come to understand at that time I didn't even know there were different tribes of Montagnards.
Right.
I found out years later that they were probably Jiraiya, and the Jiraiyas are a matriarchal society, and that kind of conforms with what I believe, because just with the events in the village there.
How fascinating. I think today there are 54 recognized ethnic minorities in Vietnam. And when we think of Vietnam, we tend to think of the Vietnamese, who are the majority population. But there are all these ethnic groups up in the mountains, and the French name for them was Montagnards, mountain people. And they were overwhelmingly, some of them were, on the Viet Cong side, some of them were on the US side, but most of them were on the US side. Jeff, you have your hand raised?
Yeah, I was going to ask, when you got back to Da Nang, did anybody know of you or of your existence, or did you have to, when in your debriefing, say, well, guess who I am, and this is my story?
Yeah.
No, sir, it was quite a sensation. They, they didn't know who in the hell I was. And of course, I wasn't supposed to tell them either. And I told them, I gave them my code name, and I told them to call the embassy down in Saigon and talk to a man named Dan. And that's what they did. And they pretty well, all except this one lieutenant who didn't believe them. He thought I was a deserter. But I actually went back there within about 4 days. I went back to Saigon and met with this guy at the embassy. And my first question was, did you find Silver's body? And he says, he's dead. And I said, yes, sir, he's dead. And he had no idea. And I told you earlier that we'd ambushed a bunch of Viet Cong, which were in ambush for a RVAN unit. And we caught them before they got to ambush the RVAN unit. And after we was ambushed then, they caught up with us, and they took charge of his body and said they were going to bring it back to somewhere, wherever they were stationed. I don't know, I remember that. But and I assume that they never made it. I don't know, they either that or but they didn't.
Thank you.
It sounds like you didn't have much or any training for what you endured. Were you trained at all in language or nothing like that?
No.
Survival?
No.
Escape and evasion? Nothing like that.
No.
Jeez.
But then, there wasn't a lot to pick from at that time either. A good part of those 5,000 people that were in Vietnam were support people.
Right.
And this Dan fellow I'm talking to you about, he was the one that interviewed me, and he had all my records laid out there on the desk in front of him. And I grew up in northeastern Arkansas, and I grew up in the woods. I'd been hunting since I was 9 years old. I was familiar with firearms. I'd lived among, country people, farming people, which, a little bit different than Montagnards, but still, that type of people.
Right.
And I think I've always thought, and I don't know this, it's just a guess on my part, that I just always assumed that he thought I would be a good pick rather than some boy out of the city or something, But that's the only guess. That's the only answer I maybe have for it.
What a mystery. To compound, not only the hardship and trauma, I keep using that word that you went through, but what a mystery about your service. I mean, rarely is there somebody who serves in the military who really doesn't know what exactly they were doing and why they were doing it, and they weren't allowed to talk about it, and no survivors. There's no survivors you could find that would help shed light on the experience. And how do you live with that kind of uncertainty and I don't know, mystery?
I have a friend who's actually a veteran, and he's going back to Vietnam this fall. His wife is Vietnamese, and I have more or less pinpointed to him where I think the village was. And his wife's uncle is, I don't know what he does, but he spends a lot of time on the border over there, on the Laos border. And Terry seems to think if anybody would know or would have any idea that he would be one. And so I'm actually kind of hoping that he can answer maybe that question for me. Because I've got a good memory of what everything looked like in and around that village. And possibly he can find a place that resembles that. I don't know. It's just a guess. But as for the uncertainty of it, I could spend the rest of my life being upset about it.
Yeah.
I could spend the rest of my life, worrying about it. I could, well, I couldn't because I've never been a drinker, but I could stay drunk.
Right.
I could do drugs. But
Right.
what would that gain? And it would almost be an affront to everything that happened. I can't do that. I had to move forward. And I Carrie here, my wife, is my fourth wife. And I went through the other three pretty hardly.
Yeah.
And she has encouraged me, and she's talked to me, and she understands, and she wanted me to write this book so that it would be known, and that my grandchildren, I've got nine grandchildren and 9 great grandchildren, and she said, we're both genealogists too, by the way, and she said, somebody down your line one of these days is going to want to know about this.
Yeah.
And she bugged me pretty hardly about it. She tells everybody that it was written through a veil of tears and edited the same way.
Larry Woods, you say that Keesler Air Force Base, you were Air Force then, Larry Merlin?
Yes, I was. Yeah. And I was only an E2.
E2.
Yeah.
E2.
Yeah. I didn't have any rank or nothing.
Connie Davis, hi. I'm
can't
sorry,
hear her.
unmute yourself, Connie.
So the advisors that were in there in the early 60s, so it was CIA paired with military, like Larry was?
Man, I don't know. Most of the advisors I met were special forces. And I know that back in the early days, there had been a few 2-man teams, but I was the only 2-man team that I ever knew about. And I wish I could answer that for you, but honest to God, I don't know how they did it. I was pretty green, ma'am. I was just pretty green.
Isn't that something?
Yeah.
Isn't that something? You were there on the front lines, early part of the Vietnam War, but you just knew where you were and what you were doing. You didn't have the bigger and you were a young kid. You were a kid.
Yeah.
You're 22 years old. Travis, Buggy, first of all, I want to say hello. Thank you for joining us. Travis, why don't you speak up and say what you put in the chat here?
I don't know if everybody can hear me, but I just also, like many people, thought all the advisors were special forces. I just can't comprehend that Larry was thrown into the fire like that, given his level of training, literally in a foreign country you couldn't point to on a map. I mean, it's just extraordinary.
Yeah.
He was able to get out on one piece.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we've heard, Larry Murley, about the survival school and the escape and evasion and how serious that training is, how good that training is. But you did not benefit from it at all. And yet you were able to escape. Just stunning to me. Jeff Witherell, did you have something else you wanted to say?
Yeah, I was just going to say the other thing that I understand how, people were over there all the way back after World War II and things, but in 1963, the precursor to my intel side of the Army, I was in the Army Security Agency. The Army Security Agency were the people that had the radio research companies during Vietnam, and they would do all the collection, intercept and de-effing and stuff like that, direction finding. And they were in there also right around that time. The first casualty from the ASA was like 1963. He was a radio operator.
Pardon me.
Yeah.
61.
His name was
61.
David.
Oh, 61. Okay, 61. Yeah. Okay, sorry.
December 22nd, 1961.
Yeah, so those guys were in there also, and they were doing all the collecting and things like that. on the signal intelligence side?
My answer to that is for the first 10 days, I believe it was, I was there before we went up into the country. I stayed at the Continental Hotel down on Tudo Street, Saigon, and there was a bunch of the ASA guys staying there at that time. And of course, at that time, they were dressed in cities too, you know. And I never got it really acquainted with any of them or anything, but I knew they were there and I knew who they were. But yeah, and I'd heard later. After I wrote the book, people started asking me questions, and I didn't have any answers at all. So I figured if I'm going, I got to educate myself. And so I started reading everything I could read about the Vietnam War. The first thing I read was Street Without Joy by Dr. Bernard Fall.
Yeah.
And then I read The Bright Shining Light by Neil Sheehan. And I've read several independent guys like me, Paul McNally, the Marine, and James Morrison and James Smith, and a lot of these guys have read their books that they've read. And but my biggest bit of education came from a book called Vietnam: An Epic Tragedy, 1945 to 1975 by Sir Max Hastings. And I've had to learn about the war myself because, like I said, I didn't know anything about Vietnam. I did not know anything, and I've learned so much. For instance, this up there on that trail, you know, I had no idea what. I never heard of the Ho Chi Minh Trail, you know, to put it like that. I never heard of that. I didn't know what till later years, you know, when I read about it.
Amazing. And you know, Larry, we've done 2 trips to Vietnam with the Veterans Breakfast Club. I've taught courses for years on the history of the Vietnam War. And when we traveled 2018, 2020 with some Vietnam veterans, Larry Woods went, Ben Wright went, they're with us on the Zoom tonight. And I think it stunned me that, you know, these veterans, like I said about you, they kind of knew what they were doing and they knew everything about where, you know, what their mission was and where they were stationed. But in terms of the bigger picture of the war, that wasn't something that concerned them. They had to do their job and they had to focus on their job. And it's only later then when you can kind of understand and put what your service in a bigger context, a larger context. Trey Berman, you had your hand up. Trey, did we lose you here?
Oh yeah, no, I put my hand down because the conversation moved on, but I was going to recommend a book just for talking about Vietnam. One of the ones I've enjoyed recently is Autopsy of an Unwinnable War. And it goes more into depth about the issues that we made with our strategy and what made the Vietnamese strategy so great and what made what political decisions we made wrong, what political decisions we made right, what political decisions they made wrong and right. And it really helped me, you know, navigate the war because you hear so much about it. There's just so many differing views. You get the very simple kind of, we went in and did something, all the way up to like pages and pages of stuff. So it's Autopsy of an Unwinnable War by Colonel Hoponsky. I don't know the first name. It just says Colonel Hoponsky. Yeah, that book it's amazing. I highly recommend it to anyone who hasn't read it.
And I've not read it and I've not heard of it. It's a relatively new book. You can see March in the world of books that's new, March 4th, 2019. That's a great recommendation. Thank you very much, Trey. Thank you.
I will do that, Trey.
No problem.
I shared that here in our chat. That's wonderful. Sue Watson, how are you? If you want to unmute yourself and say hello.
Hi, how are you?
Good. How are you doing?
Yep. Great. Wow, what an amazing story. And you usually ask Todd what people do when they came home. I just am impressed beyond belief with the story, but I don't know, sense of calm and peace and still love for this place that was so horrible
Yes.
for Larry. And I
Yes.
just am wondering what those first years back. I mean, I'm yeah, blown away by your story, Larry.
I'm blown away too, and kind of speechless. Larry, what did you do? What were your first months, years like when you returned to the US?
Anger,
Mhm.
just mad at the world. Totally. I had, I don't know, like 20 jobs in the first 2 years. I couldn't hold a job. I couldn't, my first wife, I just, I felt sorry for her later,
Yeah.
but, and she never liked me after I came back at all. She, we'd been married like, I don't know, maybe 4 years or so, 5 years, I guess, maybe. And, she never liked me after I come home. And, we lived together for another 18 years, but, it wasn't pleasant.
No.
And, but anger, and I was always mad. I was always angry. I was always on the edge. I was just, unhappy. And, I don't know how I was.
What were you able to tell her about what had happened to you?
I never told her a thing.
Well, that didn't help, Larry.
I wasn't supposed to.
My gosh. I'm once again, I'm speechless. I just can't imagine being put in a position where you had this horrific survival experience that you could not even mention to anybody.
Yeah, it was hard.
That's a
My
lonely,
parents.
lonely life.
Yeah, my parents.
Yeah, your
I
parents.
I couldn't tell my father even about it.
Oh, I'm sorry. John Pert, I'm reading the chat here. John, yes. Who said that they were? John, you were in the ASA, the Army Security Agency?
Yes. Who
And
else
you're-
was that?
And you asked who else on this program was in the ASA. You were Jeff,
Okay.
Yeah,
Jeff Witherall.
yeah.
What, I was, communication security.
I'm sorry, John, I got you broken.
Okay, I was communication security,
Okay.
05G20.
Oh, 5G. Okay. Okay. I was an officer and I was at the tail end of ASA. I was in the 329th in Korea.
Okay.
And that was in 76.
Oh,
And,
okay.
right after that, and for everybody's information, the Army Security Agency is one of the military arms of the National Security Agency. The National Security Agency has the Army Security Agency under it, has the Air Force Security Service, and it has the Naval Security Service, I think it's called. And so there are 3 collection agencies for the National Security Agency. And so they do the tactical stuff. So they're out there in the core and below type units. And then the National Security Agency has the field stations, and you'll see these big antenna farms in different places in the world. We used to have, I think there's, I don't know if it's still there or not, the one in Berlin, there's one in Augsburg, there was one in Shimi, Alaska, there's one in Udorn, Thailand, all over the place. They had these big antenna farms. They were run by the NSA, also manned by military. And at the end of 76, when I came back from Korea, they decided to turn over the ASA units to the actual divisions and corps of the Army or the Air Force squadrons and things. So they had a tactical side of intelligence of doing this collection, and the NSA kept the field stations. They kept the antenna farms. So that's how that worked out. So, but the Army Security Agency goes all the way back to World War II, and they did all the different collection, breaking code, direction finding, all those kind of things. And that's what they still do today. They're still out there in the woods, doing this kind of work.
Yeah.
So,
Larry, I just keep thinking more people need to know about your story. I mean, it's singular. It's not like one that you hear. And part of it is coming home. I'm just thinking about coming home in 1962 when hardly anybody knows what Vietnam is. Nobody knows what that we even had advisors there. This was not an issue yet. I mean, this whole thing that we know, there wasn't even the beginning of a, Vietnam War veterans groups or associations or anything like that. You were out there on your own. What a lonely life.
Yeah, it got that way. Of course, nobody knew I'd gone anywhere. At that time, you come home and where you been?
Yeah.
Okay, I've been to Vietnam. Where's Vietnam?
Right.
So it wasn't much good. And actually, telling them where you've been. The one thing that I did do that kind of blew up in my face, I was remembering just now, is I went back to the little church I'd gone to, growing up there, and started, hanging out with younger guys, most of them in their teens and everything, And I started talking a little bit to them and told them, you need to get yourself ready. There's a big war coming. You're going to have to be mixed up in it.
Yeah.
And I said, you should get yourself ready. And a couple of the elders in the church heard about it, and they were ready to toss me out of the church for saying this to their kids, And so I shut up about that. That I figured after that I better just keep my mouth shut about it.
Yeah.
And I did.
Well, Larry, I'm very much looking forward to reading your book and learning more, and then talking with you further about your story, because it's just, I know that you've done a lot of podcasts, you write for the local newspaper, you do a lot of radio interviews, you've written other books about other subjects, you're a prolific writer. So you have gotten your story out there, but it's so new to me and it's so fascinating to me that I'm looking forward to reading up on it and getting back to you.
I appreciate that.
And everybody here, Sean, I don't know. I think on the Facebook side, I think we put the link also. Everybody here on the Zoom side knows the link to both your website, larrymurley.com, and also to the Amazon site where your book is stored.
I signed it. If you go to my website, I signed it.
Okay, you signed it on the website.
Yeah.
You signed copies.
Yeah.
And I have your address. Do I not? Are you in Texas?
Yes. I had a little debacle. I tried to email you back on that email address you gave me, but it bounced.
Uh-oh. That's been happening with my email. That may be a my side problem here.
Okay.
I'll send you another email, and I'll make sure, because I want to put we have a magazine, Sean talked about a VBC magazine. I'd love to have your story in the magazine too. So if you'd be willing to share it. But
that's my job anymore.
Excuse me?
That's my job anymore.
That's your job, is getting your story out there. Thank you again, Larry. Thank you for joining us from Texas. How hot is it there?
Pleasure.
Like 200 degrees?
Half of the time. It was a while ago when I sat down to log into this, I noticed it was 100 degrees.
Oh.
And it's like, it was like 6 o'clock in the evening.
Oh, boy.
And, it's going to be that way all the way through the rest of the month. It's been that way for 2 weeks, and
yeah,
it's getting dangerously dry. We're under burn ban now.
Right.
Yeah. Yep.
God bless you, Larry. That's all I can say.
Thank you, sir.
Sean?
Yeah, I wanted to highlight Scott Masters. He had a guest for potential tomorrow evening.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry, Scott. I missed there. Okay. Scott, yeah, who is the guest potential for tomorrow evening?
Well, you mentioned at the start that the author for tomorrow had to cancel. So it so happens I had a Zoom session set up with an American veteran for later in the week. So I just shot him a quick email to see if he might be interested, and he said yes. And he was at Midway and just about everywhere in the Pacific you can imagine. And Trey will be very excited that he was a bridge officer on the USS Enterprise.
God dang it! I have something scheduled.
You better cancel, Trey.
Yeah,
it was a sailing event.
Well, the good thing is all our sessions are archived on YouTube, so you can watch it later, Trey.
I'm gonna have to watch it. The sailing starts at 6, it ends at 8. I'm gonna have to immediately bust home and then try to catch the tail end of the Zoom, maybe ask a question. and then
Oh, then-
watch the actual thing. Because
Trey, I was going to say, Trey, if you missed the one tomorrow, I am Zooming with him on Friday afternoon with some students, and I can send you the link to that one.
please send me that link because I'm gonna be. I'm gonna be there for that.
Great.
down.
Scott, if you wouldn't mind, Scott Masters, sending Glenn Flickinger and me any
Thank you.
contact information you have for the veteran, and we could connect with him and get him on tomorrow night. That would be absolutely terrific.
Absolutely. I'll do that right afterwards.
Oh, I appreciate that. Hey, I want to thank everybody for joining us. 3 more announcements or reminders, I guess I want to say. One, we have the July 2nd, Saturday, July 2nd screening of Top Gun Maverick. We're going to get some carrier crew members, air crew members. We're going to screen the movie first at 1 p.m. It's 2 hours and 12 minutes. And then we're going to have a 1-hour conversation in the theater right there. We'll turn up the lights. We'll have a microphone. And we're going to do like a VBC session with the veterans who are joining us to critique what we've just seen in the theater. We're hoping to get some good carrier fighter pilots there. This is in the Pittsburgh area, in Bridgeville. We'd love you to come and join us. It's $8 per person. You could email Betty at veteransbreakfastclub.org. You could email me, Todd, at veteransbreakfastclub.org. You could pay by credit card on our website by going to the donate now button and donating $8, and that'll cover you. You could pay cash at the door. We do need 50 people to sign up to make this a go. So we're hoping that it does go. I'm expecting that it will. Please let me know if you have any questions. That's one announcement. The second announcement is I met a wonderful woman, and many of us who were at our Flag Day event at McKeesport met Frances Stewart, who drove to the event in this beautiful car, the 1958 Pontiac Star Chief. Original manufacturer retail price, $3,122. Seat belts were an option that you could purchase if you'd like. She is offering to drive veterans around for half a day here locally in the Pittsburgh area in the car. It's a beautiful experience to ride in it. Please do let me know if you'd be interested in riding with Frances. She's a wonderful woman, and I think would really enjoy taking some of our veterans around in the car. So let me know if you live nearby. And then finally, we have a survey. It's a 3-question survey. It takes 1 minute, and would love to have you take it. Here it is. I put it in the Zoom side. VBC feedback survey. It's simply, what did you think of the latest VBC program you attended? What did you like or not like about it? How can we improve our programs? We're looking for feedback to know what works, what is striking a chord, where we can improve. And we've already gotten a lot of responses, and it's really helped us to tweak our programming and also to plan future programs and guests. So thank you very much for joining us. Sean, do you have any parting remarks?
No, I'm looking forward to tomorrow's in-person event at Christ United Methodist Church. And thank you all for joining us tonight.
Thank you. I know it wasn't totally open conversation, but boy, did we get an education and inspiration for sure. Larry Murley, I salute you. Thank you again so much. Doug and Beverly, thank you for joining us. Travis, thank you for joining us for the first time. Good night, everybody.